Renting out property sounds like a pretty safe gig. A little paperwork, the occasional repair, maybe chasing down a late payment or two. But sometimes it's not that simple. Sometimes the people you rent to bring more than just furniture into your home. They bring darkness, secrets, and things you can't explain. These are 4 true stories from landlords who thought they'd seen it all, until their tenants showed them otherwise. Story 1. The Locked Room. Mark had been a landlord for over 10 years. His third-floor unit in a quiet Chicago neighborhood rarely had problems, until 3B, the tenant, a quiet woman in her 30s, paid early, barely spoke. Ideal, right? But within 2 months, other tenants started complaining about a rotting smell from her unit. Mark knocked. No answer. He left messages. Nothing. Finally, he gave notice and entered the unit. The living room was spotless, but all the mirrors spray-painted black. Dozens of candles burned into puddles, symbols carved into the wood floors. And then the bedroom. The door was locked from the inside. He forced it open. No one was there, but in the center of the floor was a single photo, a picture of him standing in front of his own house, taken from the bushes. She never returned. Her number was disconnected, and to this day he never figured out how she locked that door from the inside and disappeared. Story 2. The Red Stains. Susan had inherited a small house in Savannah and decided to rent it out to cover taxes. Her first tenant was a young man named Kyle. Friendly, soft-spoken, a bit awkward. A few months in, she got a call from the neighbor. "You might want to check your place," he said. "There's something wrong with your porch." Susan drove over. What she saw still haunts her. Red stains. Thick, dark red stains smeared across the front steps and porch railing. She thought it was paint. But when she knocked, Kyle answered with wide, trembling eyes. He said nothing, just stared at her. Behind him, the hallway was pitch black, even though it was broad daylight. She asked about the stains. He simply said, "I was feeding it, but it's still hungry." She called the police. Kyle was taken in for a psychiatric evaluation. But the stains? They were never identified. Not blood, not paint, just something else. Story 3. The Ceiling Knock. Tony rented out his basement unit to a single mother and her daughter. They were lovely tenants, quiet, paid on time, respectful. But 3 months in, the woman called him in a panic. Said someone was knocking on her ceiling every night at 3:03 a.m. Tony lived upstairs. He assumed it was plumbing or heat expansion, but he checked it out anyway. For the next week he stayed up, nothing until Thursday. At exactly 3:03 a.m., 3 slow knocks echoed through the house. Loud, deliberate. He ran downstairs. His tenants were huddled in the corner, terrified. No one else was in the house. He went back up and placed a motion-activated camera in the living room above their bedroom. The next night, the camera triggered. The footage? Nothing. At first. But right before the knock, the screen glitched, and for a split second, a pale face with hollow eyes flashed into frame. He moved out a month later. The tenants left soon after. Story 4. The Tenant Who Wasn't Alive. Rachel owned a duplex in Newark. She rented the upstairs to a man named Mr. Bennett. Elderly, quiet, always wore the same brown coat. She only saw him a few times. Rent was always mailed. Cash, never late. But one winter, the pipes froze. She went to check on the upstairs unit and noticed something strange. The lock had frost on the inside. When she unlocked the door, a wave of cold air hit her. The apartment was empty, spotless, no furniture, no signs of life, just a faint scent of old cologne. Confused, she went to the post office to trace the return address on the envelopes. They weren't coming from Newark. They were coming from a P.O. box in Pennsylvania, registered to a man named Henry Bennett, who had died 6 years earlier. Slow fade to black. Being a landlord isn't just about leases and repairs. Sometimes it's about facing the things your tenants leave behind. Or worse, the things they bring with them. Thanks for watching. If you want more real-life horror stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us which story chilled you the most. And remember, you never really know who's living in your property.